idea. Well, do you think women are oppressed?
Yes, but I think
they
it
can
varies.
be. I think they can be.
I think
Are they broadly oppressed generally?
More than men.
What's that?
More than men.
More than men. So,
In what
but they are
ways?
oppressed. Are they oppressed?
I think they can be. I don't think
They-
all women are oppressed. No.
What
The
about just in the
United
United
States?
States?
Okay.
Let's talk about the U.S. Are women oppressed?
In some ways, but I think
In
For
some
the
ways.
most part,
whole society.
For the most part, no.
no.
Wait, what's that?
I think our whole society is oppressed.
no, I agree with that too.
You know, so I think it's like
That
men
part.
and women,
Maybe
and
in different ways.
yeah, there's different ways, but I think it's the same. Honestly, I think men and women are equally oppressed.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's an
In the
argument,
United States of America.
There's an argument to be made that really there would be like a oppression based on class, which would
Yes.
transcend race. It transcends sex. It transcends all this stuff. But and this isn't necessarily something that I'm
Intersectionality.
forwarding. It's not. But people would argue that all this racism shit, all this, the gender war, race war stuff, it's very conveniently distracting to distract us from the ultimate form of warfare that's going on, which would be related to class. Some people would forward that argument. I don't know if I would necessarily buy into it, but if it is true, the obscenely wealthy are very happy to keep us all distracted and fighting amongst each other by focusing on race and blah, blah, blah. So there can never be class solidarity because the men are fighting the women are fighting the men, the whites are fighting the blacks, the blacks are fighting, all this stuff, very distracted by this sort of shit that never enables a sort of movement to actually get real shit done. But I digress. The patriarchy. Okay. Do you think men are oppressors?
In some ways, once again, I think it's situational.
Well,
Nuance.
that's not helpful, though. In some ways, they're how so?
Well, I believe there are men, and there are women too, that kind of will promote sexist ideas or just systemic sexism. And sometimes I don't think people realize it. Sometimes they do. And I do think women are as capable of doing that as men.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would just say, though, if you buy into this idea of patriarchy, which I don't think is a very nuanced way of looking at the infinitely complex way that societies are structured, to just say men bad, women
women are bad,
oppressed, men oppressor.
That's never come
That's
out of
really
my mouth.
complicated. Society is structured in a very complicated way to just put all the blame on men is kind of like ridiculous. That is the patriarchy theory. It's this apex fallacy also that we were talking about before, where very, very small proportion of people are in power, even if it is the case that small proportion of people is men. How could you then hold 4 billion people, this sort of collective guilt? Like, oh, well, these 10 men at the top have created the rules in society or whatever bullshit. Therefore, all men bad. Majority of men bad. Like, it's a really weird way to look at society. From my perspective, I actually think if we're looking at negative life outcomes, I think while it is true that you have a really small proportion of men who have that corner office, who are the CEO, who are in the executive positions, who can have more power politically speaking, although of course I would just argue that women are women are more represented in the voter base. So women themselves are voting the men in. So it's like,
That's what I talk about, internalized sexism.
well, I don't know about that, but women do have a say as it relates to politics. You literally vote these men in. But this is a really small proportion of men. What proportion of men have political power? Really, really small proportion of men. What proportion of men are CEOs or high-powered executives? Really, really small proportion of men. The average man has no more say, no more power than their female counterparts, which is like 99% of people, 99% of men have no more say than do women. It's just true. And I would then point to, for looking at the negative life outcomes, the majority of negative life outcomes are disproportionately represented by men. Men are more likely to be victims of violent crime. Men are more likely to be murdered. Men are more likely to be incarcerated. Men are more likely to be unalived by police. Men are more likely, all these things. Men are more likely to be
they're
homeless.
out here being crazy.
But see, you got to be careful with that, because then it opens up this door to generalization, because people will make this argument about, well, hold on, it's really black men are more likely to be in prison. That's due to racism, right? You'll say that, right? But then when it comes to men being more likely to go to prison, you'll say, well, that's their choice. They make that choice. If you're going to say that the criminal element in men is due to them being men, because you're citing to, well, there's more men in prison, you gotta be careful, because then it opens the door to racism, which would say that there's more black people in prison because of some innate characteristic of black people, which I reject, to be clear.
I don't think it's the same at all.
Well, you can draw these similar comparisons. If you're saying, I'm looking at crime statistics, and more men commit these crimes, men bad. Then if it's like, well, hold on, more black people commit these crimes than white people, it opens the door. If you open the door to men bad because they commit more crimes, you then open the door to this racial group bad because they commit more crimes. I reject both. I reject both.
No, I agree with you on that. That's why I'm all about nuance over really big generalizations.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I
Yeah.
can see the correlation.
Just saying.
I don't see relevance.
But I've never said any of those statements. So I'm still like, that has nothing to do with my views of feminism. Like, I don't think men bad. So, yeah.
I
I
just
mean-
think it's more likely.
But as it relates to patriarchy, even granting that, the vast majority of the people at the top are men, we also have to say that the vast majority of the people at the bottom are men. That's the homelessness, men who commit suicide, victims of war, all this stuff, prisoners, et cetera, et cetera.
But who started the war? Men. Who sent them to war? Men.
Do you think like a 19-year-old boy in Kentucky had anything to do in World War II, World War I with being sent to war?
Yes.
What
But the
does a
people who are
19
sending them to war are men.
Yeah, but how does that change? Like the
His
19-year-old
own
who's
people
actually
are
in
doing
war.
him
It's
dirty.
political
like-
leaders.
I agree.
Exactly.
No,
Also-
once again, that's why I like the
most
concept.
of them are men. Like,
But that's not
Oh, no, you're
fair
okay.
to generalize all men just because the political leaders
No, I
happen to be
know.
men.
but like, I'm literally looking at the entire world. There's no women out here saying,
So,
let's go to war.
Does your empathy have a gender filter?
Honestly, no.
But I'm confused. Then why bring up this idea that, well, it's terrible that 19-year-old boys who don't want to go to war get sent to war and get killed,
That
or
is horrible.
right? But why the need to say but? Why the need to say, well, it's the men who send them to war? Like, why?
Because it's literally,
It's a red herring, though.
it's a butterfly effect
What
of
does
men.
it have to do with that, though? What does that 19-year-old have to do with
It
the
doesn't.
fact
I'm not
that his
talking about a
political leader
19-year-old.
sent him and his other
Has
peers
nothing-
to
I'm
war?
saying men are
How
literally
is that his
making
But-
other
but-
men victims of men. Like,
Hold on, but the perpetrator, by the way, mind you, a war can sometimes be a defensive war. So maybe the leaders of the nation who happen to be men are like, well, shit, we're getting invaded. Sorry, guy. Like, we don't want to be
and
doing this,
who's
but we have
invading
to.
them? Another country ran by a man.
Not always the case. I have a couple things on this.
It's usually the case.
Well, look, historically, if we look at queens, for example, we look at female monarchs, we actually find that queens were much more likely to wage war than kings. So this idea that
talking
like
about today.
if sure, even today, women are heads of state. Yes, absolutely, they would be engaged in war. It would absolutely happen. This idea that if women were all world leaders, everything would be peaceful. I don't know about you guys. I've seen women fucking brutal towards each other. Women can be fucking brutal towards each other. Women can be violent towards each other. This idea that women are completely peaceable people
No one's
is
ever
no
said
ridiculous.
one said that. No one said that.
Yeah, but this idea that like, oh, well, if we, I'm not making the case that women would be more prone to war, although there is some historical precedent for when women did have power, they were actually more
Same
likely to
with
wage
men.
war. Well, not the same with men.
Yes, and
Look at the world today.
Well, yeah, there's more men in power, so it would proceed that yes, like, but if you do like a per capita assessment, per capita, when women were monarchs, they were more likely to go to war. When women were queens, leaders, empresses,
but
whatever.
did they?
Yes.
How many? Let's. I don't know the statistics.
Nick,
I've,
Google
like,
the queens more likely to go to war than men. There has been historical studies done on this specific thing. But I guess my question to you is when I bring up male disadvantage and you say, well, who set that system up? Does that imply that men deserve the disadvantage?
No.
Do men deserve the disadvantage?
No, I never said that to begin with in this whole podcast. Like, I'm not a man hater. I'm just looking at the majority. The majority of all of these things are men. Like, it just is what it is.
But you're shifting the discussion away from the actual concern about male disadvantage to either current day or historical blame towards men. So it's like, and it's just this red herring. It's like, okay, well, you're saying men collectively are to blame, which isn't true. It's not true. It's small portion of men in power who make these decisions.
This is why I like the concept of intersectionality, because there's a lot more layers. And yeah, someone who's privileged in one thing may not be privileged in something else. And I do think for everyone, no matter whatever system's oppressing them, we should try to dismantle that.
Yes,
Also,
agree.
if men like built this system, then clearly, even if it's true, wouldn't it be a system that hates its own architects?